This is Linnea, and you're listening to Without Your Head, which I've done in a lot of movies. Have a good day, and stay scared.
Welcome to the Station of Decapitation Without Your Head. I'm Nasty Neil.
This is Annabelle Lecter.
That would make me terrible, Troy.
Yes. And we're joined by Ramon Fernandez, the writer, the producer, the director of Glory Days, The Life and Times of Macaulay, Alig, which is available on video demand August 16th. How are you doing?
Good. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. So,
thank you.
First of all, what made you want to do the documentary?
Well, basically, I was in New York in the 90s, and I remember just how decadent it was and how much fun it was. And one day, it just all kind of went away. Started with Giuliani's cleanup of the city, and then once it collided with the murder of Angel Melendez and 9/11, that was sort of it. And the city that we see now is kind of what came after. But people need to be reminded of what New York City used to be like. And also, I think to have it seen through the eyes and the experience of Michael Alig, who ran the nightlife for about a good 10 years, I think it was a good frame to tell the story through.
Mm-hmm. When I was watching it, it is almost a lot of it's a documentary of the nightlife of New York, because it starts, with like the end of the Andy Warhol era, and then
right.
So there's a lot of ground covered.
Yeah, I like to call it edutainment, if you may. You're going to be entertained, and there's going to be this whole thriller going on. But obviously, the movie is pretty wide in scope. It goes from the death of Warhol all the way through today's, bottle service and the state of nightlife today. So I did want to sort of, that sort of just keeps filtering in and out, the way that it's woven with his story is a parallel to New York's story and how they both kind of, lost their innocence in a way.
Mm-hmm. It is really excellent because throughout the movie, you get such a variety of opinions from the people who know him, from the people who were in the scene at the time. And I never felt the sense that there was any bias from you, from the film itself, as to what you think of this man. It's all contained from the people that experienced it that you have in these interviews.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to be able to get a large amount of interviews, which means that I can have kind of many different sides to it, because he is a complex man, which makes for a very interesting, subject for a documentary. There's nothing ordinary about him. But I told him from day one, before I shot a frame of footage, that if we were not to make a fluff piece that would make him look good in a way and sort of ingratiate him back into society, I think they would crucify us both. I really had to sort of take a step back and just be a documentarian and just really show what's there in front of my camera. And then I think it leaves ample room for the audience to make up their own mind as to what they think of him.
Mm-hmm. Which I always think that's what a documentary should do. But
precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mentioning that you told him you didn't want to do a fluff piece. Did you become friends with him while making this, or were you friends with him before?
No, I was in New York at the time of his reign, but I never did actually meet him. I used to just sort of was on the sidelines. I was in the rave scene back then, and those crazy 90s. But so we were never really friends. But obviously, as you spend time with somebody and you get to know them, you get to know their cadences. I wouldn't say that we're close buddies, but we definitely, we text and speak on a regular basis. I see how he's doing. I check on, see how he's doing. And, once you sort of discover somebody's humanity, it's kind of hard to pigeonhole them as to, you're this type of person or you're that type of person. You're always going to find things that you like and dislike about everybody, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even though you're really aware of everybody's opinions about him, and that some people really think that this guy might be just a narcissist or a sociopath or whatever, and people have felt used by him. Do you kind of go into this warily, thinking, I can't let this guy catch me. I can't let this guy do these things to me. And how have you felt since then?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I had to describe him in a way, I would kind of say, on an overall sort of, one stroke, I would say, he's kind of like Andy Warhol meets the Joker. You know, in the sense that he's got that sort of creative genius to him, but he's also got a very dark side about him, and a dark sense of humor, and you know, so on and so forth. But once you get to know it, it's more tolerable because you almost expect it. You know, shock for the sake of shock value, and sometimes. But you know, as far as him, you know, getting to me or anything like that, I always had my camera, so, you know, there's only so much that he could do without, you know, revealing too much. So he, I'm sure, was guarded in certain instances, although I do believe that this is the most candid that he's ever been in front of any camera. And, you know, I don't think any of the previous work, he wasn't... Because you understand that we got him after the 17 years that he spent in prison and atoned for his crime, for his horrible crime, as an older man that can look back and reflect on himself. Whereas everything that he had done on camera before was sort of around that era, and he wasn't really atoning for anything, let alone even admitting to it. So I got a very different person this time around than anybody else has gotten before.
Now, I don't want to go too far into, because there's a lot of things that are very interesting. That's constantly interesting. The things that pop up are, I was fascinated the whole movie.
Nice.
But you know, when he meets James St. James afterwards, that is such an interesting time for him, because you can see how he wants to be back there. He wants to be, who wouldn't get out and no matter what they've done, want to go back to the way life used to be, and that he catches himself is really interesting. Exactly.
He starts to go down that road, and you can see it. And there's even an instance where they didn't know they were being filmed. And they're sort of, you know, kind of making light of things and making jokes of things. And I kind of struggled a little bit on whether or not to leave it in. I actually stopped cutting for 2 weeks. But then in the end, I decided that the integrity of the film was more important than you know, any kind of friendship that I might have had to establish with him. And he understood that. You know, at first it was a bit, you know, why are you doing this? But in the end, he understood it. And it gives a broader picture of who he is as a person. That, you know, he is, you know, very amenable and nice and very affable, but then there's going to be that sort of, you know, that dark clown that wants to screw things up at the very last minute that's there, and I think it came through.
That's I would think that would be a good reminder to him too, to see that and have to go through this and realize, you know, this, you can't do this, you can't joke about this stuff, this is something you have to face, and here it is in this documentary now, and you can see it forever. Don't do this. Exactly. And he caught himself, and you can see that he catches himself and he rectifies it. And I actually do believe it was genuine. I don't think it's just because he was catching himself, because he didn't even know that I had shot that. Yeah. So you know, it made it into the film that he had to, you know, decide to pull back, and he had to talk with James St. James, saying, "What are we doing? You know, what is it? What is this?" Really. So, but you can see how when the two of them get together, it's, you know, they egg each other on, and it's Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and they basically have to one up each other all the time. As far as with shocking value. So you get a little glimpse of what it might have been to hang out with them back then.
How long did you film this for? How long did you follow him?
This was an 8-year project, because we started, and when we started, he only had a couple of years left of his sentence, so we figured, you know, we would have plenty of time to get some interviews, and then the third act when he gets out of prison and he sort of walks into this new New York. But Michael kept getting into trouble for one reason or another, and they kept adding time to his sentence. Freeze, his roommate, who actually, you know, is the one who hit Angel over the head with a hammer, he got out years earlier, I don't know, for good behavior. So Michael is a person that, you know, it took some time for him to get out of prison. So, but on the other hand, that gave us time to gather more interviews and more information. So it was a good 6-7 years of shooting, and then another year in post, where I basically locked myself up and cut this film myself. Yeah.
Like, how much raw footage did you have to cut it down, you know, to the 2-hour documentary?
Oh, what you saw is about 10% of what I've shot.
Yeah.
So that's, if that gives you a rough idea of, how much footage we have, because you remember we have 43 interviews in this film.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So, it comes down to who said it best, and I can only say it once, and you have to leave the other 7 out. I could recut this entire film all over again with somebody else saying virtually similar things. There's many ways of skinning this cat, but I think that the footage that ended up in the film is the best, according to me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How did you pull these people in for these interviews? What made them think this is something they wanted to do specifically with you?
Yeah. Well, the protocol, that took some time. But once the thing is Michael was their leader, and once Michael was on board, then pretty much everybody else kind of fell in line, even after all this time. Some people said no, not many, but most people by being just amenable and just working around their schedule, eventually they all kind of came in. And especially the more you get, the more you beget. So if somebody has spoken, well, then I want my voice heard too, and I want my opinion heard too, because so-and-so already spoke. So as word got around that Amanda Lepore was playing, and Kenny was talking and so on, then word got around, and by the time I got to them, they were pretty much ready to get on board. But nobody got the questions in advance. Everybody was, it was a pretty virgin experience for all of them.
Mm-hmm. Has Michael seen the film?
Oh, yes, he's seen it. He saw it twice. And we had a premiere at the Manhattan Film Festival, which we won. And it was very emotional for him. We, in fact, had to cancel the scheduled Q&A afterwards, because he just was in no state to speak to anyone. Because, I mean, it's got to be pretty heavy, I think, to see your whole life be put up there, reduced to 2 hours,
mm-hmm.
With the crime and everything, with all of your friends and critics and people in the room and press. So yeah, he's seen it. And, at first we had some issues that we had to go over. But I stuck to my guns, and this is the film that's coming out, and, he's full on board with it.
And it must have been so hard for him to be there and watch this and probably see opinions from these people he's never known before.
Exactly. And, I mean, let's face it, he's a likable guy. You want to like him, but then there's a certain part of you that doesn't forget what he's done.
Yeah.
And I think a large part it's the dismemberment. I think that's one thing that people just can't get past. If you killed a guy and it was an accident, that's somewhat forgivable. But I think it's the hacking the body in two that people really it just puts you in a different category. It puts you right up there with Hannibal Lecter in people's minds.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting that you it also captured him watching like the Macaulay Culkin movie and the original documentary.
Right, because he hadn't seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, he has a...
Go on.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say what 17 years to have missed, right on the he went to prison right on the cusp of our technological revolution. So when he came out, he didn't know what internet was, what a cell phone was. He'd never seen Party Monster. He'd never seen Times Square without hookers and pimps. It's sort of like a man traveling through time in a time machine from 1997, which is pretty fascinating to watch. He said, he equated it to coming into Blade Runner, at one point.
Yeah.
Everything was moving so fast, So I forgot what the question was, but
it was just about
it was interesting. It was interesting to have him see himself, Party Monster, and to critique it, and to finally see how most people see him, because most people know him only through that film. Mm-hmm. Until my movie comes out. Obviously, that'll be a different thing.
Yeah. What were your thoughts on Macaulay Culkin's take on Michael?
Well, I mean, that would be, listen, the movie is a classic.
Uh-huh.
It's for a reason. The quality, the production values aren't, necessarily the greatest. I think they did the best of what they could with what they had at the time. I think that Macaulay's performance, as Michael says, it's a little out there, but he eventually gets to you, and he does tap into the spirit of the era, Macaulay, regardless of what you say about his accent or whatever. Because personally, I think he sounded more like James St. James than he did Michael. But I think they nailed a certain rhythm that the era had at the time, and the fact that it was shot at the time that it was shot, it was almost contemporary. You know, I'm making a period piece. You know, they shot it right around the time, right after this had all happened. So it's got a pretty raw feel to it that I think that people will always flock to. There's a big contingency that loves that movie. And the director was in my film. So that's terrific that we got to encompass the whole thing and sort of make it the Michael Alig movie, you know, by encompassing and not competing or anything like that, by embracing all the other versions that have come before.
Has there been any backlash from anyone?
Not yet, but I'm sure there will be.
Right.
I'm sure it's coming my way, you know, that people will say that why am I bothering to make a movie about this monster and so on. But to that, I just say, watch the film, you know, and then come at me, you know, at least extend me the courtesy of showing you what happened. And then you can go ahead and point your fingers and call the names and do the things that people do, which there's nothing I can do about that. You know?
Well, as you both were saying, that this is really not just about him; it's about the entire scene at the time in New York.
Right.
And that in itself, if you didn't include him at all, any of his crime, it would still be an amazing film to just discuss those things.
Oh, well, thank you. I think it would be still a very interesting piece in the sense that there's a lot of the movie hits you on many levels. You know, like I said, it's the murder is one thing, but you're really learning about 30 years of New York City history and you know how it's come to where it is today, and a lot of things that people simply forgot because it's just time moves so fast, and now we're at the age of the internet. And, you know, some of the things that you're going to see and hear in this picture are pretty inconceivable to think about today. You know, people doing cocaine openly in bars and you know, young kids below the age of 16 going into clubs openly. You know, just the way the way that the city was, it was a different world. And I try to immerse the audience right back in there from the get-go, down to taking you to the dance floor of the Limelight to show you what that was like.
I remember even being a kid. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I
was going to say, I remember being a kid and just visiting New York City and going through Greenwich and Soho and all these different places. And it was so rich. It was so fascinating and wild as a young person to just see, wow, and just go in like clothes shops and things like that. And I didn't even go out at night. And I've been back since, just in the past few years. And even for me, who wasn't even living there, I wasn't even involved. It is striking how tame everything feels. Just walking around neighborhoods, it's just, it doesn't have that same
feels?
Yeah.
That era is done. That era is finished. You know, as far as being, you know, back then we weren't slaves to the rent. You know, you could be a struggling artist, someone with ideas. Basquiat could not afford to live in Manhattan today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You couldn't, you know, Keith Haring could not afford to live in Manhattan today and become Keith Haring and hang out with the people that made him that. And go meet Warhol and hang out with very interesting people. They're all out in Bushwick, they're all out in Williamsburg, and getting even pushed out even further to Queens because, let's just face it, now the city is for the elite. And that room, that edge that New York City had is really sadly no longer there. I don't know if it'll ever come back, or maybe it'll come back in a different way. But as of right now, it's you know, it's a pretty safe environment, which is the one good thing I would say, that you can come home at 4:00 in the morning and you're not going to expect to be mugged or bothered or raped, which is great. And for that I am thankful. But it kind of washed away the fun with it. It took away a lot more than just a crime. You know, there was a certain thing about being in New York. It was live here at your own, you know, risk.
And I think people react to that because when you're in an environment that is that dangerous, you kind of have to rebel against that to keep yourself surviving mentally and emotionally. You've got to rebel against that and do something.
Right. I mean, could the Ramones triumph today like they did back then? Is there a CBGB's equivalent? Yeah. Is there, how much of the creativity is being washed away with predictability? Yeah. When you go out and you know exactly what you're going to get and how much it's going to cost and what you're supposed to dress like. Back then, it was just absolute madness. And a circus for adults, kind of. Yeah. And we missed that a little bit. Yeah. It was time to remind people of it.
Annabelle and I visited Joel Reed last year in Manhattan, who's a film director, directed Bloodsucking Freaks in the 70s. And, he talked a lot about that. We walked through the Bowery, and now it's just totally fine. But he said, back in his day, it'd be all the drunks and bars where you can buy 5-cent beers and just...
Yeah, the funky people, exactly, where, Bob Dylan, used to hang out. Yeah. Absolutely. That sort of bohemian feel that the Village had is now been rather Disney-fied,
You'd mentioned earlier about Michael being, very likable, and that comes up a lot in the documentary. A lot of the interviews saying, he's full of charisma. Even people that might not have liked him, but they talk about that.
Right.
Do you think if he wasn't a charismatic guy, that that the whole case and the story, wouldn't be something that's talked about?
Well, I think if he wasn't a charismatic guy, I don't think he would have been Michael Alig in the first place. I don't think he would have been able to lead 300, 4,000 people, at his heyday, however many he had. I don't think he would have gotten there in the first place because talent alone isn't going to cut it, And just the fact that, listen, here's a guy, let's say if I went to prison for as long as he did. When I got out, I doubt that I'd be the same person. I'd be probably a harder version of myself. To a certain extent. This guy, I don't know, he's the same guy in a way. His sense of humor is the same. His affection for people, the way that he handles himself, the way that he talks, the way that he walks is the same guy, that went in. Obviously he has learned lessons and he spent 5 years in solitary, and of course he's not the same guy. But I don't know that I would, necessarily come out as visually unscathed as he has. And I think that's due in great part to his charisma,
He definitely, someone had mentioned about how he is just a fun person, that he has fun. And he just seems like this totally, I don't know if resilient is quite the right word. But
go ahead.
Just that he came out and he was bright and full of jokes and humor and warmth.
If you were doing the interview with him right now, he'd probably be jumping on your lap. He's that guy. So and he's very harmless, and he actually kind of works at making sure that he puts you at ease around him. He makes sure that happens, and there's no edge to him as far as am I in danger at any point? And then you kind of have to remind yourself, oh wait, this is the guy who did that. Yeah. But there's none of that when you speak to him in person. He's actually a pretty nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple people that don't feel that way. There's the one guy in particular who really has no sympathy, no empathy, just nothing. That just this guy is this guy is evil. He's evil incarnate, and he's going to go out there and ruin the world. Yeah,
right. Well, I like I said before in the movie, I wasn't looking to make a fluff piece, and I wanted haters in the picture. I did want a different view, a different take on it. People who simply weren't impressed and just found him to be a drag, and just found him to be a narcissist, and a younger version of Caligula and the whole bit, which he is all those things as well. They're not lying either. He is a narcissist. He is, whether or not he's a murderous sociopath, who is to know? Yeah, I know that he has paid his due to society for being that in the past. Whether or not he's gonna, butcher somebody new, I seriously doubt that. But I don't live inside Michael Alig's head. I just made a movie about him.
Mm-hmm.
But it is interesting about those people because, I just mentioned this, the man that's really, really adamantly against him, and a few of the other people that have more negative things to say. But none of them are stupid, and none of them are kind of played off as, you can't respect them. They all seem to have very valid reasons for feeling how they feel. And it's nice to have that balance that you clearly strove to provide.
Right, exactly. And, because if it was one talking head after another talking about how wonderful this guy is, then the movie wouldn't make any sense. It's like a joke without a punchline. There has to be some balance. There has to be a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that gives you a better overall view of the subject at hand.
Now, it's mentioned in the movie about the blood feast party and how that's kind of eerily similar to what happens later on. But what was your take on like that aspect of Michael? Do you think that's almost just a coincidence that he was also into horror movies? And I would think Blood Feast is from the Herschel Gordon Lewis movie.
Oh yeah, well that like Kenny says it. He says that. At one point that it's not a coincidence that he ended up cutting somebody up because he used to play horror movies and watch them as if they were comedies. He would laugh at them and gore and so on. He's rather obsessed with that whole thing. And there was some pretty dark theme parties at Limelight, which were sort of amounted to basically a Halloween party kind of thing. Did that influence? Of course, I'm sure it did. There's some people that say that the whole thing was planned, and he just wanted to know what it felt like to feel somebody. And honestly, to be truthful, nobody will ever know what really happened in that room, except Michael and Freeze and the third person that was there. But does he do things that normal people don't do? Yes. Did he end up doing something that a normal person doesn't do? Yes. Could there be influence with the things that he's watching? Who knows? I mean, if you start going down that road, then, what horror movies was Adolf Hitler watching? Yeah. Exactly. People have it in them or they don't to do that kind of thing. I think, I don't necessarily think that one is because of the other. I think it's just all part of the same package. He's just into dark things,
And it doesn't help that he was doing massive amounts of drugs at the time. Exactly.
That does not help. The massive amounts of drugs and the combination thereof, if you recall in the movie, Tioki talks about them doing ZEK, which was Xanax, Ecstasy, Crystal, and K, and it all mixed up together, and mystery vials of this and that. So that certainly, was the thing that pushed it all over the edge. Sort of like a sort of a poisoned soup. You start putting in really bad ingredients, and you start mixing it all around, and you put them in the hands of the wrong guy. Someone might end up dead. And that's pretty much what happened.
I think James St. James had said that it's not really a good excuse because he's known people that have been super fucked up before, and they're not killing people. But at the same time, like we've already said, this man is different, or he wouldn't have been the success he was. So you can't really judge any of his actions by what would happen to a more normal-brained person.
Exactly. It's the combination with Michael's personality that led to all of this. Because a normal person, first of all, probably wouldn't do that amount of drugs. But a normal person, under those kinds of drugs, who knows, might have died, might have, become a superstar, might have done some other things, might have become an amazing photographer with the influence of it. In this case, it went to that sort of dark edge and went right over the edge. And he didn't, and he had to go away for 17 years and go think about what he had done and who he had become. So yeah, absolutely. His personality comes way into play when you think about mixing that with heavy drugs and a dark edge to begin with.
Now, was anything ever addressed about just between you guys or wherever that what could have possibly influenced him? Because he was bullied as a kid. He was bullied hard, and that's why he retreated into New York City to begin with. He was in this kind of just this totally homophobic environment in this really small town, and what part that would have played in him acting out in that way.
Right. That's something that you would probably have to ask him. I know that he did have a rough upbringing, but let's face it, we have come a long way, and our treatment of and understanding of homosexuals and homophobia, and we have Glee now, and we have we have gay people in Congress. It's just a different world than the environment that he came out of, and they all flock to the city for that same reason. You have to go to a big city to sort of at least be somewhat accepted, so there was a community of you where you could all get strong together. Because if you're just the only one in your high school, well, yeah, you're going to get picked on. And I do think that rage, that sort of anti-establishment tyrannist attitude that the club kids had definitely came from as a pushback to the bullying that they'd all received, growing up in the 80s.
You talked about the internet and showing him those movies that he had missed for so long, but do you know, just from his point of view, just coming out and seeing that homosexuality is like more mainstream today, do you know what his thoughts on that was?
Oh, he loves it. Obviously, yeah, he's all for it. In the film, he talks about how decadent everything has become, and how you can't even make fun of society anymore because what they were making fun of back then is now the Kim Kardashians of the world, and it's so outrageous that you can't even point a finger at it anymore because it's kind of real now. So he and being who he is, he loves that. Kind of like the world has caught up to him in a way, if you may, as far as the openness of it all and the outrageousness of it all. And Lady Gaga picking up where they left off with the style and so on and so forth. Their influence is global at this point, and people need to be reminded of the origins of all of this, from EDM to what happened after the raves and the underground that is now going on. It all traces back to these roots.
There was a quote by James St. James I saw. It's not in the movie. It's something he said in like 2007. It says he's a mirror. Talk about Michael, and will give you whatever he thinks you're looking for. Now, did you find that he was always genuine with you on camera?
Yes, pretty much. I basically pointed my camera and just let it roll and just let him be Michael. And the questions that I asked, he answered, with utmost cadence. So once James showed up, obviously the energy changed a little bit because they hadn't seen each other in 17 years. And so it was sort of almost like they were going to pick up where they left off, which they kind of do, which was kind of refreshing to see. You get a little glimpse as to what it might have been to hang out with these two crazy freaks. And I say that in quotations. Yeah. Back then, what that might have been like. But, they do definitely push each other's buttons, and I think they always will, until they're old biddies. And I think there will always be, a huge tease fest between the two of them. But in the end, they're a lot more alike than they are different. There's a reason for that friendship.
James St. James also said that he'd like to be included in whatever modern culture kind of comes about. How likely do you think it is that Michael will eventually get back into some kind of scene and really, I mean, this is what it seems like. This kind of thing, this entertainment stuff, is what he was made to do. He just ended up in a totally shit circumstance, and it destroyed everything. I mean, it was just impossible to foresee what happened, and any other day it wouldn't have happened, and who knows what culture would be like now. Do you think that it's just his destiny to kind of just continue to do that kind of work?
Yeah, well, he it's not like he's going to become an accountant and start working for Price Waterhouse. He's always going to be Michael Alig. And whether he expresses it in a club or he expresses it by designing a T-shirt or making a painting and then ejaculating on it, it's always going to be Michael Alig doing his thing. And I do believe that he has started to promote a little bit with karaoke again. I think they have a small venue that they gather in the Lower East Side with, like, you know, the few remaining club kids. And I think they he doesn't have a night curfew anymore. He's able to go out at night. And so he has rejoined some of his old friends, and obviously not as hardcore as back in the day, because you can't, and I don't think he can do drugs. I think he'll go back to prison if he does. So he's being very careful about staying clean. But he's definitely, you know, whether it's through his art gallery openings or whether it's, you know, those are the people that he knows. And he's not going to stop doing that and being who he is, obviously not to the extent that we all used to, you know, 20 years ago.
Yeah, it was actually a director friend of mine had messaged me last night that Michael is in a friend of his, a vampire film that's coming out.
Yes, I've heard they're shooting something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's there you go. Still the performance artist. You know, because let's not forget that what he did was really performance art. You know, more than promotion, more than, you know, what they really contributed was, you know, astounding performance art where nobody wore the same outfit twice. You know, and they really did it for real. And they would break into abandoned buildings and throw illegal parties and have runway models in the subway, you know, and sort of bringing, you know, in a very Warholian way, bringing our everyday things and making them extraordinary. You know, they bought stuff at the thrift store. They would do runway shows at the post office and sort of combine our everyday mundane life and infuse it with quote unquote fabulousness, you know. So that's really what his contribution is just amazing performance art, really. So I'm not surprised that he's acting in front of a camera and doing, you know, vampire things, especially vampire things, you know, nice and dark. Fits right in.
Something excellent. You know, I watched a Joan Rivers interview with these guys, and something that was said is that, you know, all this crazy stuff they do, the stuff that's dressing up costumes and things like that, most of that is legal, and there's no reason people can't have fun in their everyday existence and live this kind of fantasy life. At the time, I think none of them were really into drugs and all the super troublemaking stuff. Maybe they were like breaking into buildings and things like that, but I mean, kids do
but it
that,
wasn't
so.
but drugs hadn't turned dark yet. It was the fun part. It was the good stuff. It wasn't heroin. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't ketamine, you know. It was social drugs and things that made people want to hug each other. And so I mean, back then it was a lot more shocking to lead a hedonistic life, and people were not used to seeing lipstick on men, let alone, you know, the crazy things that they did. So it's you know, it's all relative to the era that you live in. You know, I think people today are a lot freer to dress how they want, a lot freer to say who they are, to declare, you know. So when you look at those interviews, it's interesting, not just from the club kid experience, but also as a period piece at the time that they were shot. You know, when people were not used to seeing the types of, you know, Lady Gaga and that sort of thing. That was reserved for the rock stars, and the ordinary people were the ordinary people, and it never mixed. And he kind of brought in all that chaos. If you would say, clothing-wise, they were like punk rock in a way. Well, punk rock did for music, these guys did for style. You know, it just, you know, basically flipped everything on its head, and everything was acceptable so long as you wore it with some degree of pride.
Did your opinion on Michael change during the 8 years, you know, when you started filming and until when you finished the movie?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think you can have somebody under a microscope like that for 8 years and not get to a different place as a human being. I would be a robot. Otherwise, I would have no feelings. And as a filmmaker, you know, you're always looking for someone's humanity. With him, it was difficult because, you know, he's always on and he's always Michael, and you're waiting for that moment where he kind of lets his guard down and he can actually let you in a little bit, and that's what you play in the film. Opinion wise, yeah, I mean, obviously when I first met him, I didn't know what to expect. I was going to meet a murderer, a butcher, a guy who was this evil guy, and within by the second interview, and listening to everybody else's opinion, and he would write me letters from prison, and I would correspond with him. I would send him some magazines and stuff like that, just to, keep his spirits up and let him know what's going on with the film. And mind you, this took years where it was just dormant, where the whole movie was just in my head. And, I was just collecting information. So yeah, I'd say by the time that he got out of prison, we had our third and final interview, and he fully revealed himself to me as much as Michael Alig ever will. I think that you kind of accept him as someone who has paid their due. He's a human being, deserves another chance. But then again, I'm not going to hit the audience over the head, no pun intended, with that message. That's up to them to decide. But yeah, I would say so. I would say it's definitely changed.
Mm-hmm. Did you reach out to any of the family of Angel?
I did. Of course I did. Yeah. I wanted them to be in the picture and to give their 2 cents and to talk about their lost one and what he was like. And then I wanted to have a whole segment on that. But unfortunately, they've had some pretty bad experiences with previous shows and films that have been made about him, and they have a trust issue. They just don't trust anyone. So it's a shame, because I would have really liked to have that angle there and sort of shown a little bit more of the humanity that Angel was. But I think I did the best I could with what I had, considering.
Yeah, that's a shame, but also understandable on their part.
Of course, and I had to respect their wishes and just hope that when they see the picture, they see that I didn't have any ill will, and I hope that they like the picture and that they understand that Angel isn't portrayed as anything other than just another misfit from New Jersey who just wanted some acceptance from the big city.
You're very fair throughout the whole film. I think you're fair to him, you're fair to Michael, you're fair to all the people you interviewed.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that, because that was definitely the angle. I think it leaves it is the kind of movie that you may want to go and have a cup of coffee and discuss it afterwards and have differences of opinion and so on. That's what I want, to maybe start a conversation about it.
Just you personally, after this is released, and what other films are you working on?
Well, I make my living currently as an actor in front of the camera, so I play a lot of heavies. I just got in yesterday from New York from shooting The Blacklist with Jimmy Spader, which was fun. And then I'm doing something else for Marvel, which I can't talk about because I signed a non-disclosure agreement. But it's good. And so there's a few other things. And currently, as a filmmaker, I am writing a screenplay that I want to direct after the movie is out. This would mark my first feature film. And I know who I want in it, and I know what's going on with it, but I'm still sort of putting the bones together for it. So we'll see. And I'm hoping that this picture will definitely put me in a different light other than just a performer. Hoping to be able to do it again.
So what is your background with film and acting and the business in general?
I studied theater in school. I have a business degree. I spent when I graduate, when you graduate, you do what your parents expect you to do. I spent 5 years on Wall Street, but I never forgot about the performing arts. I had a minor in theater, so I ended up quitting. Then I bartended for 10 years to have the daytime free to audition, and little by little, I started getting parts, and then I ended up moving to California. And the rest is history. I'm fortunate enough to make a living at it. I love it. I love the pictures. I love the film industry. My mother was involved in the film industry. My father was a bullfighter. So I've always been sort of always been in showbiz from an early age. I was always on sets and so on. And so now to be living in California and being bi-coastal back and forth to New York, I just love it. So it's, one of those things that just called me.
How does your family feel about your career and about this film in particular? Because I can imagine some people thinking, like, why did you even make this about this guy?
Yeah, but they love it. They are very supportive of my career and of the direction that I've taken in life. And my mother was always very much in love with the industry, so she kind of gets to live vicariously through me in that sense. And so, my friends and my family have all been extremely supportive of this throughout all the 8 years that it took me to get it out. And now they're just ecstatic that it's finally getting some press and people are actually going to see this film rather than just my friends and family, that we're going to go wide with this. And it's like my baby is, graduating school. And she's, I did the best I could and I hope they like her,
Mm-hmm. You mentioned it won an award at a festival. I think it's won several awards. I saw in the.
We won the Manhattan Film Festival. We only participated in 4 festivals, and we won one, which was terrific. The Manhattan, which is right where it all happened. So that's just beautiful. And then we went to Wisconsin. We went to Beloit, which was wonderful. There was a local high school that was given the opportunity to watch one of the 150 films that were available for the festival, and they chose mine. They chose Glory Days, so they came in a matinee in a yellow bus, and they loved every minute of it. They asked some great questions. So I'm thinking that if these kids in the middle of this small town in Wisconsin are interested in the picture, I think we might have some legs. I think people are gonna take a look at this, because it's a picture that not only Michael's fans can get into, hence the lengths, but also somebody in Kansas who knows nothing about it can just hit play, and you'll either be nostalgic because you were there, or you'll learn something new that you didn't know, and it'll be fabulous either way. So hopefully people will react positively to the picture.
Really must have been amazing, the Manhattan film.
Say what?
It must have been just amazing, and I can only imagine the responses of the people in the audience who did live this. Yeah.
Well, you could. There was a lot of hooting and hollering going on in that room.
Yeah.
And then a lot of and then Michael crying at the end. He broke down. It was a very charged and emotional night in that room, and he had his attorneys were in there, and certain people that had been with him throughout the entire thing. And so it was a heavy night. It was a heavy, heavy night. It's unfortunate that we're not going to get to have a theatrical release, but I understand. I would have loved to have a small theater and have people come dress up and see the picture.
Yeah.
But it's a very expensive thing to do, and most people nowadays watch documentaries from home. It's a long documentary. People might want to pause it and come back to it the next day and watch it in 2 parts. But even though it's long, I think that it moves fast enough that it's never boring. But I still think that watching it from home is definitely the best way to do it.
Do you think over time this will be something that shows up in theaters ever? Because I could see it appealing to a certain crowd. I mean, certainly, like you said, there's people that can walk into it who don't have experience. But I know myself, I go out to some stuff in Boston, so it really appeals to me. And people that have been regulars in the scene and people that are up and coming with nightlife would be fascinated about how this was, this was like the era of greatness for this kind of stuff.
And it plays. We played here at the ArcLight in LA, and it was the size of a building, and it was just amazing. And but such is the economics of distribution, and this is what the cards that were being dealt. I mean, let's face it. Just 10 years ago, in order to watch a documentary, you had to go to some obscure theater or some film festival. There was no chance. Nowadays with Amazon and Netflix and so on, people say, do you want to watch a movie or a documentary? It's the golden era for documentaries, really. They're everywhere. And, documentaries about nothing, that are going up. So having so much meat on the bone and, putting it out there for a wide audience, I think it's going to be great. Whether or not it ends up at some midnight theater somewhere, I would love to see that.
I hope so. We have a bunch in
That would be-
Boston, so there's
that would
like
be
3
terrific.
theaters that do midnight movies, and Coolidge is like a champion of midnight movies. And like you said, this is a great movie for conversation. I think it's an experience that many theaters can have with a group, and it's going to have a charge. Obviously, we don't all know people personally, but I think that we'll carry that. The people that are going to be interested in the film, it's going to be a very social thing.
Yeah, well, I'm from your mouth to God's ears. Let's hope that is the case.
Mm-hmm.
And I made the movie that I would like to see myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, other than that, I can't do much more than that. I'm not trying to cater to any one specific group, not even to Michael Alig himself. I really made a film that would entertain me and my friends, and so and the people that were there, and it's respected by the people that were there. So far it's been pretty much 100% positive. Even people that don't like Michael like the film. So we'll see where it goes. It's my first time out, and I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would change about the filmmaking process or the final product?
The filmmaking process?
Yeah, any of the decisions you made during it, or really anything.
As far as in general, the industry at large. Well, I mean, this is a documentary, so it's my first time out because as a documentary, you don't have to ask anybody for permission. You just grab a camera and shoot. Filmmaking, fiction, that's a whole nother ball game, and that you spend most of the time looking for money. And it's just changed. The industry has changed at large. It used to be that, somebody would write a great story, then a producer would like it, he would hire a director, the director would hire an actor, and they would go shoot it. Now, you have a concept of a story, you pitch it to an actor, you cast it first, the actor is interested. Because of that interest, then you go raise the money, and then you hire the director and go shoot it. It's backwards. So I would change that, the fact that, in the United States, if you go off and make a movie and it bombs, somebody loses a house, somebody goes broke, somebody never gets to make another movie. It's art. It's not meant to be liked by everyone, and it's that eternal battle between art and commerce that commerce is kind of winning. Whereas in Europe, it's somewhat, the government subsidizes it. Half of it is paid by the government. If nobody watches it, well, that's just what happens, and you go off and you make another one, and it doesn't really matter. Whereas over here, the pressure is so much on making that money that I think it ultimately affects the product itself.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that I would change. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite documentaries?
Oh wow! Now you're throwing me a curveball here. I love anything by Werner Herzog. Obviously, one of my favorites is My Best Fiend, about his relationship with Kinski.
Fantastic.
I really liked also recently, well, not so recently, The Fog of War, about McNamara, one of the most hated men in the 20th century, looking back on his life with regret. I thought that was a fabulous piece. And I think that, Making a Murderer, I thought O.J. Made in America this year was the documentary of the year. I thought it was an amazing piece. I find similarities with my work as far as how they describe the state of Los Angeles at the time, centered around heinous crime. I sort of do the East Coast version of it. But I thought that was really, really interesting work. There's the Jinx as well. So there's a lot of good stuff being put out there right now. I thought, like I said before, documentaries are at an all-time high. It's their golden era. It's the golden era of television, but especially the golden era of the documentary. We've never seen anything like this.
Yeah. It's interesting because it feels like there's room for all of these documentaries. It's not like you make one, you've got to worry about people seeing it. That there is... people are just almost like binge doing documentaries. Exactly.
And they're consumed. You watched it once, so now you move on to the next one. So there's always room for the next thing, So you were feeding the audience in a certain way. So I hope they like what I had to cook, And if Party Monster is any indication of it, we're hoping for obviously multiple viewings and some sort of cult status with time. That would be terrific. And then after this is done, after we go nationwide, we are looking to expand internationally, as Alig has fans all over the world. Germany especially is number one in Party Monster viewings. They've expressed some interest in possibly playing the film at the next Berlinale, at the next Berlin Film Festival, in the panorama section. We are currently in negotiations. Outside of that, we'll see. Sky's the limit, and the audience will tell me how they react or not. And it's out to critics right now, so we'll wait to see what they have to say.
Mm-hmm. How can they follow the movie, and how can they follow you online?
Well, the movie can be followed. It's going to be coming out August 16th. And it's going to be on Amazon, on iTunes, on YouTube, and a string of others. We're still compiling that list together, but we got picked up by about 7 or 8 or 10 platforms, so it'll be readily available. It's going to be a lot of publicity all over the place for it. So just basically look out for it, and you'll be seeing me on the small and the big screen.
Do you have a Facebook page? Because I was trying to find it, and I couldn't find anything.
Yes, we are currently finishing work on that. It's Electric Theater Pictures. Electric Theater Pictures is the name of our company. So if you look through there, you should be able to find us and what we're up to. And we also have a Twitter account, which we're going to start to expand now that we're about to release.
I know you can't talk about it, but can you say the show that you'll be on?
The what?
I know you can't talk a lot about it, but can you at least tell people the show that you will be on?
I'd rather not get in trouble. I think Marvel is very powerful. They have better lawyers than I do. So sorry that I can't, but just to let you know, it's going to be pretty fabulous.
Yeah. Awesome. Congratulations.
Right on.
Yeah. It's a big deal.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
I know what it is, and I'm looking forward to it, but I won't spill the beans.
You probably, if you're a fan, you know probably what it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Along the lines of the Jessica Jones lineage. So it's along those lines. But I can't say anything further. But I really appreciate you guys having me on, and I'm certainly glad that you watched my picture and that you were into it.
Absolutely, it was excellent. Absolutely excellent. And it's inspired me to start going out in Boston again because I took a break.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. You go do that. That sounds great. Right on.
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. It was right away I was into it. So, yeah, and I knew
perfect.
about Michael from before, and but which is also is good because I've seen Party Monster several times, and this is a whole new documentary where it's a lot more in depth about certain things, and
exactly.
So it's not just more of the same thing.
Yeah. We don't just glamorize the whole thing. We go to the nitty gritty, and it's a cautionary tale. Deep down, it's a cautionary tale. It really is. The boots and the glitter are fabulous, but it's a cautionary tale of what can happen. It's Icarus. You get too close to the sun, your wings are going to melt. Just everything in moderation, including moderation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you for having me, and looking forward to hearing this, and looking forward to releasing the picture. And thank you for the kind words. We put a lot of work into this, and I'm just very, very happy that people are reacting positively to it.
Awesome.
Absolutely, it was great to have the opportunity to see it. Thank you very, very much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Take care.
You too.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
How you doing? This is Lance Hendrickson, and you're listening to WithoutYourHead.com.